I can't, I just can't, I can't wrap my head around it.
Well, that breaking news right now at 10 o'clock out of Western North Carolina. A 16-year-old girl arrested for the alleged murders of both of her parents and her grandmother. An adult man has also been charged in their deaths.
I didn't believe it. Because if you knew Star, she was a good kid. She'd come over here. She always had a dog with her.
We have some breaking news for you right now. We're getting an update on one of the suspects charged in a Western North Carolina triple homicide.
And this is a story that we've been following since last week when 2 people were arrested and both charged with 3 counts of murder.
In the tight-knit community of FairView, North Carolina, 16-year-old Star Grant was known as a protector. She was the girl who stood up to school bullies and never went anywhere without her dog. But on the evening of May 7th, 2026, that image shattered forever.
She would take care of me at school. If like someone was bullying me or something, she would stand up for me. It's so weird that to expect my neighbor to do all that, and someone I grew up with. I was at their house constantly.
After 4 days of haunting silence, deputies finally breached the doors at 18 Ashworth Drive. Inside, they found a house of horrors. 3 generations of a family, Travis, Kimberly, and 66-year-old Sharon Grant, all executed. But the good kid of the neighborhood wasn't a victim. She was gone. 80 miles away in a Tennessee hotel room, police finally caught up with Star and a man 12 years her senior, Devan Loving. Tonight, we're untangling a web of conspiracy, a shocking kidnapping charge that flips the script, and the chilling reality of what really happened during those 4 days of silence. This case is developing by the hour, and the details coming out of the Sevier County Courthouse are disturbing. If you want to stay updated on the forensic breakdown and the upcoming trial, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Dark Minds. Before we dive into the background of Devan Loving and the kidnapping charge that has investigators baffled, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. We're seeing this story make headlines across the country, and I want to see how far this news has reached.
Crime scene tape still hanging here on this fence, just 1 day after deputies with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office say they found 3 adults dead with gunshot wounds here in this trailer. Now, one of the suspects accused in their deaths, the victim's daughter and granddaughter. All 4 of them beloved by the community, leaving neighbors shocked.
To understand the tragedy at Ashworth Drive, you have to understand the girl the neighborhood thought they knew. In the small, winding roads of FairView, Star Grant wasn't a name that inspired fear. It inspired a sense of safety. Neighbors don't just remember her, they speak of her with a confusing sort of reverence. They describe a girl who was a fixture of the community, usually seen walking her dog along the gravel shoulders of the road, offering a wave to every passing car. But it went deeper than just being polite. Star had earned a reputation as a guardian. In the hallways of her school, she was the one who stood in the gap. If a student was being picked on, if a bully was cornering someone smaller, it was Star who stepped in. She was the protector, a girl with a moral compass that seemed calibrated toward justice. Her childhood friend, Sailor Tagner, recalls a bond that felt like family. She describes Star as a girl who would take care of you, who stood up for you when you couldn't stand up for yourself. And then, there was the home itself.
Sailor Tagner grew up next door to 16-year-old Star Grant and her parents, 41-year-old Travis Grant and 42-year-old Kimberly Grant.
Her family was great to me. They treated me well. She was an amazing person to me. They treated me like I was their own, and it felt awesome.
In so many of these cases, we look for the cracks, the previous police calls, the whispers of domestic unrest, the history of rebellion. But at the Grant household, the record is hauntingly clean. There were no sirens at 18 Ashworth Drive before that Thursday night. Friends who spent time in that trailer describe a home defined by warmth, not walls. Travis and Kimberly Grant weren't just parents. They were described as great people who treated every kid in the neighborhood like their own. There was no outward sign of a pressure cooker, no red flags fluttering in the North Carolina breeze. This is the mystery that has left investigators staring at the floor. How does a girl who spent her life defending the weak suddenly decide to execute the very people who provided her sanctuary? How does a protector become a predator? The answer began to emerge not from the physical house, but from the digital one. As forensic teams cracked open Star's digital life, the image of the innocent neighbor began to fracture in real time. They found a trail of breadcrumbs, encrypted messages, location pings, and a connection to a man nearly double her age that had been growing like a shadow in the dark. As the digital pings moved toward the Tennessee border, it became clear that the girl the community loved had been living a double life. The protector hadn't disappeared. She had simply changed sides. But as we look at the evidence of those final days, one question remains that makes the skin crawl. Did she turn because of something inside her? Or was she forged into something else by the man waiting for her in that hotel room? The deeper the police dug, the more they realized that the girl who left FairView wasn't the same girl the neighborhood was still praying for. While the sun began to crest over the Great Smoky Mountains on the morning of May 8th, the tourist town of Gatlinburg was just waking up. But on Ownby Street, the air was already thick with a tension that the morning fog couldn't hide. Outside a nondescript hotel, local police and agents from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation had been watching a vehicle since 4 a.m. A vehicle they knew belonged to a girl who was supposed to be dead, or at least in grave danger. The world still thought of Star Grant as a missing victim. But inside the Buncombe County War Room, the narrative had already shifted. As the clock struck 8:30 a.m., the silence on Ownby Street was shattered. The takedown was swift, tactical, and absolute. When the door to that hotel room was breached, the mystery of Star's disappearance ended, but a much darker chapter began. There, standing among the unmade beds and the scattered remnants of a life on the run, was the 16-year-old protector from FairView. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was 28-year-old Devan O'Neill Loving. He wasn't a stranger from the dark corners of the internet. He was a man from her own county, someone who lived in the same world she did, yet stood 12 years ahead of her in life. In that moment, the missing person alert was deleted. In its place is a charge that sent a shockwave back to North Carolina. 3 counts of first-degree murder and felony conspiracy. As the handcuffs clicked shut on a grown man and a teenage girl, the official story took a turn that no one in FairView was prepared for. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an arrest. The image of the two of them being led out of that hotel, Loving, the adult, and Star, the child being charged as one, created a visual paradox that the public couldn't reconcile. How did this pairing even happen? Loving's presence turned the tragedy into a puzzle with missing pieces that felt like lead in the stomachs of the Grant family's neighbors. The community was left reeling, caught in a desperate tug-of-war of logic. They wanted to believe their good kid had been brainwashed, stolen, or forced into a nightmare by a man nearly twice her age. They wanted to see her as a victim of a 28-year-old mastermind, but the charges, conspiracy and murder, suggested something far more coordinated, something cold. As they were separated, Star to a juvenile facility and Loving to the county jail, the silence from the suspects was deafening. But the loudest part of this story wasn't what happened in Gatlinburg. It was what happened before the flight. Investigators began to look back at the 4 days between the gunshots on Ashworth Drive and the arrest on Ownby Street. 4 days where Travis, Kimberly, and Sharon lay in that trailer while Star and Devan were still there. Was she a captive in her own home, forced to walk past the bodies of her parents? Or was she a willing participant, spending those final hours in FairView, packing her bags with the man who helped her pull the trigger? The truth of their relationship was buried in the 4 days they spent in that house of silence. And as the investigation deepens, we have to wonder, was Gatlinburg an escape from a crime, or the beginning of a life they had planned over the bodies of her family?
Deputies say they believe the victims had been dead for several days. Deputies say they were first called to the home Monday after a family member requested a welfare check, but no one answered the door. They returned Wednesday for another welfare check, then again Thursday evening when they were finally able to get inside. After finding the 3 victims, deputies realized a 16-year-old Star Grant who lived in the home with her parents was missing.
The air inside the Sevier County Courthouse on Monday, May 11th was stagnant, thick with the kind of tension that only follows a crime this unthinkable. Devan O'Neill. Loving stood before the bench, a 28-year-old man stripped of the anonymity he'd enjoyed just days prior. He was there on a fugitive from justice warrant, a legal bridge to bring him back to the soil of Buncombe County. but as the judge began to speak. But the narrative of the Bonnie and Clyde flight to Gatlinburg was leveled by a single word that no one saw coming: kidnapping. The judge looked directly at Loving and stated, "You are wanted over in North Carolina for kidnapping, and then 3 counts of first-degree murder." The words hung in the courtroom like a physical weight. Until this moment, the public saw a partnership, 2 people fleeing a scene of carnage together. But with the addition of a kidnapping charge, the state of North Carolina threw a massive wrench into the gears of public opinion. If Loving is a kidnapper, it implies force. It implies a victim. It suggests that perhaps the 16-year-old protector didn't walk out of that trailer on Ashworth Drive by her own choice. Yet, as the legal dust settled on Loving's side of the bench, the other side of the scales remained terrifyingly heavy for Star Grant. Despite the kidnapping charge against her companion, the state of North Carolina made its own stance crystal clear. Star is not being treated as a child who was led astray. Because of the sheer brutality of the gunshots that ended the lives of Travis, Kimberly, and Sharon Grant, the prosecution is bypassing the leniency of the juvenile system. Star Grant is being charged as an adult. At just 16 years old, the girl who once stood up to school bullies is now staring down the barrel of the ultimate consequence. In North Carolina, being tried as an adult for triple first-degree murder means her life, for all intents and purposes, could be over. She is facing life in prison without the possibility of parole, or, in the most extreme reach of the law, the death penalty. And here is where the puzzle pieces stop fitting together. Here is the contradiction that is keeping the investigators in FairView awake at night. If Devan Loving kidnapped Star, then how is Star simultaneously charged with conspiracy to murder her own family? Conspiracy requires a meeting of the minds, a shared plan, a joint intent to kill. You cannot easily be both a captive and a co-conspirator. So, who was truly in control in the dark of that FairView trailer? Was Devan Loving a predator who stole a girl's soul before he stole her life, using her as a shield for his own violence? Or was Star Grant a mastermind who used a 28-year-old man as the muscle for a deep-seated resentment we have yet to understand? As Loving requested a public defender to fight his extradition, the clock began to tick. The answers aren't in the courthouse records. They are buried in the forensic timeline of those 4 days of silence. The state says they planned it together. The kidnapping charge says he took her against her will. Only 2 people know which version of the story is the truth. And as they wait in separate cells, the shadow of the death penalty looms over a girl who hasn't even finished high school. When the yellow tape is finally taken down and the sirens stop echoing through the trees of FairView, we are left with the most difficult question of all. Why? How does a life of 18 years of marriage and 66 years of community presence end on a Thursday night in a hail of gunfire? While investigators haven't released an official confession, the forensic puzzle pieces are beginning to form a chilling picture. When you look at the facts, a 28-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl, an 80-mile flight to a Tennessee tourist town, and that sudden, jarring charge of kidnapping, the motive points toward a classic, deadly collision between a teenager's rebellion and a family's protection. In many cases of familicide involving a minor and an older accomplice, the spark is often a forbidden relationship. Imagine the scene on Ashworth Drive. A family that loved Star, who treated her friends as their own, likely standing as the final barrier between their daughter and a man 12 years her senior. A man who, the state now alleges, crossed the line from influence to kidnapping. It is a story as old as time, but here, it didn't end with a runaway note. It ended with 3 lives extinguished in the place they felt safest. The tragedy of this case isn't just in the blood spilled, it's in the absolute destruction of every future involved. Travis and Kimberly Grant won't see their daughter graduate. Sharon Grant won't grow old in the peace of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And Star, the girl who once stood up for the weak, is now a woman in the eyes of the law, facing a world where her life could be measured out in a jail cell or ended by the state before she ever turns 21. As the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office works through the night to bring closure to this tight-knit community, FairView is left in a state of mourning that feels more like a betrayal. They are looking at their own children, their own neighbors, wondering how the signs were missed. They are wondering if Star Grant was ever really the protector they knew, or if that was just a mask for something darker that Devan Loving finally managed to unlatch. 3 lives are over. A teenager's future is gone, and a community is left hollow. But the law still has to decide who played which role in the darkness of that trailer. With a kidnapping charge now on the table against Loving, but a conspiracy charge still hanging over Starr, the narrative is split in two. Do you think Starr Grant was a victim of a master manipulator who groomed and eventually kidnapped her to use as an accomplice? Or was she the one who led Devan Loving into that home on Ashworth Drive to remove the only people standing in her way? The truth is somewhere in those missing 4 days of silence. Let me know your theories below. This is The Dark Minds, and we will be here when the trial begins.